Welcome. Thank you for tuning in again. My name's Robbie with Airtech Coatings. This will be the actual second video, but it'll be the first video of actually starting to doing the work. To start out, I put this up here so you won't have to be looking from the book, and people sometimes forget the mixing ratios. Whenever I refer to thick, I'm referring to 1 part 55, 2 parts 4,000, and thin is 1 to 3. So whenever I refer to those two, that's what I'm referring to. I've already got my glue mixed up, and you know, I see guys that'll take a styrofoam base or a donut and squeeze up around to get a wide base, because it never fails. Somewhere through the project, you're going to turn or knock over a thing of glue and spill, and you're going to have to wipe it off the wing, and that does help. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get this one out of the way so that I don't spill it in front of everybody. And this is my thick. Like I said, these videos are mainly for the beginner that's never really been around covering, but they bought a project and they have some pretty good mechanical skills, and this is nothing hard to do. It's just learning to do it right, and I hope these videos will help you to, from the very beginning, get a good start on it, to have a good airplane outcome, and just a lot of the tricks that I've learned through the years. If you're a mechanic doing a certified airplane, we have an STC for just about, I think, it's very rare that I come across one that someone calls in and it's probably a 1920 something that they only got 2 of them flying now. So we usually can work around that. But if you're doing a certified plane, refer to your 4313 on your overlaps and what's legal. We're going to cover all of that through these various videos, doing wings, fuselage, putting on primer, doing double cover, doing solid covered wings that are solid wood. We're going to try to do a video covering some form of that all the way through. I've got this glue, and this is just a part that's unairworthy. I went and got out of the junk pile behind Central Arkansas, and it had a rusted bottom. I just chopped saw the end off. I'll use it at a trade show, or I may pull the covering back off, and if someone comes down, wants to spend a day, and you know, I just let them have this and give them some material, and they can ask me questions to kind of get started. But I shot some epoxy primer on it, and a lot of times it's fine to go ahead and put your cover right on this epoxy primer. We have a gray and a white, but if it's a fuselage, let's say you're going to see some interior parts and you're going to paint it with Airtech, we recommend that you do use the accelerator. That just really makes the paint get a full cureness in a few days. And I don't recommend painting a fuselage and say the next day or the next day putting on this glue, because you could have an area that could get scuffed and it could try to roll up the glue a little bit. I like to see on those situations, go 5-6 days a week and let that paint really cure, because it is flexible. And if you understand paints, the more flexible you get, you're leaving the chemical resistance, and the more chemical resistance, you're turning into a harder paint. So you know, all fabric companies has got that happy medium. You just can't have the best of both worlds. And you have to be careful whenever I mention this 4,000. If you'll notice, sometimes I just naturally refer to it as acetone. Well, that's the main ingredient in our 4,000, but it is part of our STC, and it's a PMA product that we sell. Just be careful. MEK will reduce this, but be careful using MEK, because everybody thinks acetone and MEK is about the same thing. They do about the same thing, but MEK is a little more dangerous, especially getting on your skin and everything, where the acetone's a little more forgiving. With that said, I'll get started. Think of the fabric is going to go on both sides of your, and remember, I'm talking this for the beginners that maybe it's not been around. You're going to have fabric on both sides of this. So we're going to have about one part of fabric go on, and then we're going to re-glue and have another part. But on this first gluing, we're basically going to go over everything with the thick. And we're just going to get a good even coat. And if you wonder where to put the glue, think about where the fabric is going to be. You don't have to glue all these spots. You're not going to glue inside this channel. You're just going to glue where the fabric's going to go. I have guys that'll come to the shop and be helping, and they'll be doing this. They say, well, I don't know, does it need it here? Does it need it here? And I just tell them, I said, well, if the fabric's going to be touching it, you know about where it's going to touch. Just make sure you put glue there. I go ahead and do both sides, everything all at once. And you're going to have a drip every now and then. Just go ahead and wait till you're close to the end, and those drips, kind of come back and wipe them off or mash them out or something. If you forget one and you put your fabric on and you feel it under there, An iron will mash that out on this product. This glue, we don't recommend activating it with an iron to make it stick down. I'll get into that later, but you know, if it's got a little something under the fabric, you can take a hot iron and kind of hold it down a little bit and it will flatten it out, and it's real forgiving as far as that. But basically go over everything. When you get to your hinge blocks here, you want to get plenty of glue around them. Don't just get real crazy, because if you know, you're not going to be putting fabric around the end of that. You're going to have places you're going to trim, but you want plenty of glue so you don't have fabric sticking up. I'm going to get into that later as far as the little small corners that you don't notice till you're putting the final paint on and you're in a paint booth. You see these little areas and you start saying, man, I wish I'd have took a little time way back there and ironed that little spot down. It's really showing up now. So I'll go ahead and start gluing this, and we'll put a gap in the video when I get done here. Since we spoke, what I did was put a whole layer on. You want to wait, you know, however long it takes to get where it's dry, and not, you know, not just barely dry, but you know, it's pretty well dry. Then I usually like to put a second coat on just to make sure I have plenty of glue base down. You can always refer to our manual, and it tells you the exact procedure. But in this situation, you know, 2 coats is sure not going to hurt anything, and a lot of times it just ensures that time where you're wondering why something's not actually going down like you want. You may not have enough glue base down. So this part now has two bases of glue down, and it's pretty well dry to the touch. At this point, I just went over to the remnants and got a piece of fabric, and today we will be using, actually, in Airtech, I will be using Superfly. Let me explain about that. Airtech process, when Mr. Mack and them came up with the STC and did all the testing way back when on the AgCats, instead of Stitz had their fabric and Synconite, instead of going through the whole process of PMA another group of fabrics which may be built at the same place, they just put it in there that our system is legal to go over any certified fabric. And I've had several customers call me and they say, well, we've always used Superfly, or we've always used this kind or that. So I worked with Superfly, and I offer both fabrics here, Synconite or Superfly. I just charge the same amount for either one, and I let the customer choose, you know. And to be quite honest, we have went through yards and yards and rows at Central Arkansas, and I asked my cousin Brian, you know, when I heard that they thought there was a difference, and I really, either apparently I haven't covered enough planes to know the difference or what have you, but I give it the choice to the customer. And we've got all kind of remnants here, and this is not going on a certified plane or even an airplane, because this part is just a piece of a rudder. So using Superfly for this, because that's just where I went to the box and that's the first thing I grabbed. When you get your fabric and lay it out, first thing a lot of times people will want to do is they'll want to lay all their tail feathers out, and they'll want to get up here real close. And I realize, yes, it costs a lot of materials to cover a plane, but the fabric cost, people think that's the big cost, but that's really not the real big cost. It is a cost, but it's not a real big one. I tell people, go ahead and leave yourself some handling room, some pulling, something to get a hold of. Don't just try to minimize everything, because you're going to spend so much time. And I've learned this in the past. There's nothing worse than thinking you've got an inch around here, and you've spent all this time putting it on, and you've moved the fabric, and you come to the end, and it's an inch too short. Got to tear it off because you don't have enough. Now you've wasted that much fabric, and you got to do it over. In the long run, it's just not much difference. You may vary 4 yards, 5 yards in a total rebuild on just giving yourself some extra room. But lay your parts out, you know, where your weave is running this way or this way. And I like to lay it out. It's going to shrink a good percentage. You're not needing to really get it tight. You'll learn at times you'll have a little mess up, and you'll have a little bit more slack, and it will, you know, if you've got a big loose area here, a lot of your shrinking may come from over here to start helping pull that out. And we'll learn that during the ironing process of shrinking it. But I like to lay it all out and look at the edges. You know, if you end up starting going around it gluing and you end up with a big pucker here, it's not good to run all the way up to a pucker and then start trying to work it out. Sometimes I'll show you, I'll try to get a spot and kind of mess it up when we're ironing, if you've got a pucker standing up here and you take this all the way up to that, you have no room left to shrink. But if you spread that shrink out over this much area, you can take an iron, take a playing card or a business card under it so it won't stick to the glue, and you can start back here and slowly start taking that up and take a pucker out. If you get started and you've made it 3/4 of the way around. So laying it out like this, I'll take my thin glue and I'm going to leave it over here so I won't make a mess. And you don't need a lot of glue on, but get it down fatty. And the way Airtech glue works, you could put glue on another spot and it's not like contact. It's not going to stick together by pushing it together. It needs to be kind of reactivated. And I see sometimes people will just take a rag in the RA4000 and they'll wet it through. And yes, that does activate a little bit, but if you think about it, just because it's wetted with reducer. There's no glue that followed that. You want the thin glue to take some glue with that reducer down to grab the other part. And let me see if my camera guy, if Kelly can bring the camera in here close, maybe bring in a little close. It's going to jar around a little bit, but we're not real professional here. If he can get a good, or I maybe angle it down on the tripod. Is that good? What I do is just start, and you don't want to just start getting out and getting messy on there, but like I said, everybody will have their own way, and you can put rubber gloves on, and they're going to end up getting melted, and you're going to fight that. I like to just kind of wet that and take my finger, and you can see when it goes down and grabs the other glue underneath and kind of activates it. Sometimes you'll see a little hollow spot, and that's fine. It's not real critical, but it is. You're wanting it to glue through, and a lot of times I tell people, if your glue's thin and it's working well, you can do this right here. Think of it as putting your finger under there and you wet it just a little bit. Now you can see my finger's wet. That's doing what it's supposed to do. Let me show you over here on the board real quick the way the glue. Now this is real rudimentary. Fabrics, this glue actually does not glue to the fabric. Now that sounds like that doesn't make sense, but you know, from what I've been told, if this was to be melted into a solid surface, it'd be like a Teflon pan. Let's just think of this as your fabric weave, looking at it from a cross section. If you come in with a thick glue and your glue's a little too thick and you lay the glue on the top, let's just say this is what your glue on the top looks like, and it didn't go in the fabric, that could peel off. You want it thin enough that the RA4000 is carrying some glue down in the weave, and it's basically mechanically going and getting a hold of the weave that way. So that's why when you're wetting through, you don't want to just use the reducer. You want to have some glue with that, because here's your base glue down here, and it's already dried. You got your fabric laying over it. When you put your thin glue on, it's taking some glue with that, and that's activating right there. Now we'll learn some other stuff putting on tapes, and it'll come in a little more clear what's going on. And at times, and then you'll come back with another thin, because once this dry, a lot of the thinner has dried out of that, but the remaining glue is down in there. So you put another coat on, and that's building it on up. And we'll look at that, especially on a time when you're needing to put another piece of fabric on top of this. You're going to need to build this on up and get another layer of thick glue for this one to stick to this. Many times people will get to the point and they'll get in a hurry, and then they'll start putting a tape over something, and they've just got the thin glue and they've laid the tape down, and yes, it paints across and it looks like it's stuck, and it may be fine for 30 years. But it's at one time that someone's got a pressure washer or doing something, that tape really didn't have enough glue on it, and there wasn't enough glue carried through the tape to make that stick. I'm always apprehensive and concerned about there not being enough glue. That's why we always go the thicker on the structural parts, and the thin is to carry it through the fabric to the next. So basically, just looking at the top, I like to go around and just wet through, and you'll learn to try to be, you know, kind of just precise of where you need, because here's what I've learned will happen. If you come out here and get a whole bunch of this wet, and then that dries, when we get ready to cut this and lay it down, now you've got glue that's dried in there. Now glue can't go through the fabric because you've got a boundary. Now and after a while, you'll be trying to paint that down, and you're like, well, why is it not going down? Because this layer of glue just caused a little boundary in there. And I'll show you the little trick where you raise it up and go underneath and give it a little wipe, and then it'll go right down. But on this part, just as long as you're wetting through, and you can see the little ripple, I kind of like to work down to one end. One thing right here, you'll notice, you'll really see it on a wing, on a full wing, and coming up to the aileron bay, and especially on a J3 where you've got the trailing edge sticking out or the tip sticking out. That whole fabric hanging there, it will try to hang down, and it'll pull weird puckers, and we'll get into that doing a wing on how to square a wing out and where to clamp it and how to do certain things. A lot of times, it usually don't happen on this, but a lot of times on a wing, that big part hanging down, or say a fuselage is on its side, and let's just say this is the rudder going up, that big old part of fabric hanging down is just pulling that fabric kind of unsquare. I'll take a knife or a razor or scissors, and I'll kind of cut in. I won't cut all the way in because that's going to get into the fine line here later on trimming, but I'll go ahead maybe and cut up to here to relieve that tension. And that way you can go all the way around, and it's probably not doing it now, but really that fabric hanging down is just enough that it's probably, going to end up with something extra around here. So just think of your very top side as all you're putting down and getting one side. Now, I see different people, that I'll have guys probably call me after this, well, I got a better way. And there probably is a better way. It's all according to what you're used to doing. And my thing always is, if I got a customer, my customer wants Robbie Staten to do it as fast as possible and as best as possible because I'm charging by the hour. So another thing, we don't want to glue on these cross ribs because we're fixing to stretch this. If you go in here and glue this, it'll work, but then you're only stretching this bay and stretching this bay. I like to leave these open for right now that's after we cut this and wrap it around. So he'll go ahead and stop the film now, and I'll go ahead and get this all wiped down real good and glued down. All right, welcome back. I've got the rudder, kind of the perimeter, glued down around the edges. And before I start going around, let's go back to the Charlie Brown scribbling over here and show you what's going to happen. Whether it's the big side or the end on an elevator, let's just say this is a side view of this trailing edge right here. And our fabric is laying across this and just barely glued on. We're going to pull this around because you don't want the fabric to come to here and the other one to come to here. I like for fabric, and and the proper way is to wrap all the way around, and really it's not going to hurt if it wraps on up inside there. That's not a concern. What that's doing is that's getting a lot of sideways shear for that to come off. If you had fabric, let's just say you had a wall over here and you had a fabric going into it, and then you went right into it with a 90 degree and turned it up and glue it, that wouldn't be a good hold because it would be trying to peel away. You're always wanting to wrap around something, and sometimes on special interiors it gets real complicated on trying to do that. And an interior is not a flying part. You may end up putting something into an edge and put a straight edge and glue it and glue something on the back. But on this, we're going to be wrapping all the way around. And a little later I'll show you on this other side, the fabric will be coming in here and we'll be gluing on this spot, and we're going to be coming back around here. So that's where the situation where we're going to put some more thick glue on and everything here. But for right now, we're wrapping around this. So there's several ways that this can be done. I like having a table out here where I can let it hang off the edge. If you look at this edge here, and you can really get precise and make everything perfect, and you have to realize that a lot of this stuff is going to be completely covered up and you never see it. You just want it safe. You want a good glue joint around. I like to take my finger and come all the way around and about as far as that's going to reach and mark that. All right, that gives you an idea. That's actually a pretty far, more than you would think it would take to wrap around that. Now you can take your tape measure and you can come around that, or you can just come around in several spots and just get an idea about how far that is wrapping around there. There's more than one way to skin a cat. I see people do it that way. And then you can come in here, You can use it, you know, this ain't a straight edge, so it's going to have to be a little bit of freehand, but you can just connect these, because this first one's going to go inside. Now this next piece coming around the outside, now you're going to want to get, you know, fairly nice, and you can either pink it, or I'll get to that point of showing you about cutting a straight edge, and it not fraying. But we're also going to have a piece of tape coming around the end of this, a reinforcement tape that's going to cover that up. But if you come around this side, now that reinforcement tape, without ironing that down good, sometimes you will kind of see that underneath. So I see guys do it 15 different ways, and all of them are right. This is just usually the way I do it, and it just kind of saves time, and you go along here. And all the way around, you're doing these marks. You can come around the end and do that, but I'm going to, at this point, have another way of doing it. You know, if you come all the way around here and mark it, and you've got this mark out here, if you cut that off short, to me, we're kind of limited then to trying to glue that around. And doing this, you're going to have some pucker. It's not the end of the world. I have come around here before. Let's just say we've got this paint like this. It's not the end of the world to come around here and just take your scissors and take a little cut in like that. That way you're doing one piece at a time. Now some guys will get all bent out of shape. Now you got this little seam. We're fixing to take an iron, and we're going to work that down smooth where you can't even feel it when we bring that other one over. You're still gluing it, and you're going to have a piece of reinforcement tape. The other way I've seen guys do this, and if I got someone else in the shop, sometime it'll help. But if you already can see this, if he gets down here close, you can see this kind of pucker. You can see the way that's trying to do. And if you start trying to wrap this all around, which this is not as bad as, say, a wingtip bow, because it's a little bigger, but you also got guys, before I ever glued this little edge on, they might have left this whole end not glued. And with leaving this not glued, I'm going to unglue it here. They might have put it down just the way we did there, because them's all straight edges. But on this whole end out here, say from here to here, they didn't glue it at all. You can get you, this is where I was talking about having some extra. You can get you a big handful of this. Now you see them wrinkles right there? I guess he's probably close enough. If you get them down on it and work it, them is just about gone away. Now these will go away with the iron on this side. And with that pulled tight, and then you can take the glue, the thin glue, and work that. And you're going to have to sit there for a little bit till it kind of catches. And I've seen people do it that way, and it works. You know, you can do a compound curve. When I say the word monocoat, probably every one of y'all know what that means. You know, that's where we used to build the models and cover out and monocoat, and you know, we didn't paint over them. That was your finished product, so you had to really take time to try to work an end of a little wing or something out. And that's where I learned all of that, just getting a big handful of it. You know, the monocoat, we used to take a heat gun and heat it a little bit. On this, you really wouldn't want to do that yet, because then you're going to start trying to shrink. But that little wrinkle you see right there, because it's all on this side, that'll come out with the iron. You're smooth all the way around here. All right, I'm going to grab a pair of scissors and come around. On little things like this, it's really hard to, I can come around the end of this, so I can say okay, I'm gonna cut my first end just like that. And then this piece, so you got this little extra hanging out here, now it's gonna come down. All right, you can just let those be a seam like that, kind of overlap a little, and your glue, you know, you'll glue it down. And sometimes you'll be trying to glue these parts down. You put glue on it, and it'll stand back up. You put glue on it, and the more glue, and the wetter you get it, the worse it gets, and you just keep fighting it. Sometimes you have to walk off from it. Let the reducer kind of thin out of it a little bit, and at some point it's going to go from too wet to now it's the right consistency of glued, and it'll stick down. Worst case scenario, just let it completely dry, and if it's a small spot and it's got glue in it and on it and under it and around it, and you just can't get it to stick, you come in there with a wet, don't wet both sides, you'll be right back where you were. Wet one side, and it'll usually stick right down. Or you can take an iron, set it about 250, and you can mash it right down in it, and it'll stick, and then come back a little bit later with some thin and can stick it in. This part right here, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this straight out. And I'm going to come over. And when you come into here, if he gets up close, you got a dilemma here. If you cut straight in there, that piece wrapping around is going to be at an angle and there's going to be something showing. This one laying down is going to be an angle. So you're going to have to do one of the two. So I usually say, all right, on this side of the fabric, I'm going to come in and I'm going to come straight in so that this time I've got the post covered good. And then now you see this bare area right here that I've created? When we do the other side, I'll cut this side and let this fabric come all the way up and cover that. So one side will take care of one side will take care of the other. And then we're going to come back with a reinforcement tape that's going to probably wrap all the way around that. Some guys will actually just use a 2-inch and come down to the center, the pinked edge, and come around to the center. Iron that real good, because if you think about it, your hinge point's going to be in there, and that's going to be inside, and you're just hardly not even going to see that. Or you can cut the holes in it and put the tape all the way around. But you make your decision when you come into a corner like that. And then I come down. Now on these big flat areas like this, you can come all the way around if you want to the side. But since you got not a round end, but you got this long area, I like to just come on down to the edge here and put my mark. And that's going to be your flat side. Now you're glued here and here. And then your other side is going to go glue here. And then you're going to rebed this with glue, and it's going to come up here and glue here. So you've got two pieces of fabric that's glued onto here and glued onto here. So you've got a good bond there that's sandwiched together. All right, I'm going to back this up off the edge. I'm just kind of hurrying through this part. Same way we did on the other side. Let's say we're going to wrap the fabric all the way around. And let's just go on in a little past that high point on the other side. It's going to be something about like that. All right. Like I said, I'm not trying to get an 8 for neatness, because this fabric will probably get just torn right back off at some point. Or if someone wants to practice, comes by and wants to practice spraying primer or glue or something. But these old scissors is getting a little hard to run. Like I mentioned in the first video, if they act like something's going wrong with them, just kind of rinse them off in your reducer or whatever, and then it'll usually free them up. All right, we've got a hinge point here. And on your other side, you got 2 hinge points. What I like to do, if he's got a good view here, real close on this one, I like to see there's a weld right there. So you got one little spot, and I like to take that fabric right down just over that weld to the edge and to the edge. So there's where that's going to go. And then your edge is out here, the edge of the barrel of the hinge. So you got it looking like that right there. What I like to do is take the pink shears and cut that all the way up to that mark. Now then, you can glue this down and glue this down. Now this spot, you can either put the pinked edge across that, and it doesn't really matter, because when you fill it with primer and do it right, a lot of times people want to put so much paint on you don't see the tapes no more, and that's fine, but that's just more weight. It's all physics. The more paint and more product you put on, the heavier the plane's going to get. But in little areas like here, it's going to get out in there and pretty well hide itself. So you can just take a straight edge on that edge and cut that. Now, I'm going to probably on the next video mention about the pinked part. Most of you guys all know what that's about, but for the beginners, we'll talk about that. That has that now to where when that glues down and that, you've got everything kind of neat, and it's not a bunch of jagged stuff, and if it was jagged, that'd be airworthy. But we're going to trying to get into the taking your time, not doing what I do as I say, not as what I do on this stuff. Taking your time and really doing neat stuff and taking your time and mark. Well, see, that's kind of jagged, but we're just trying to get through these videos, marking this stuff and getting it all laid out. So with that said, I'll go ahead and stop the video, and I'll trim all this up and get it ready to glue down. All right, welcome back. I got everything kind of trimmed off around. One thing I was going to show you here before I did, there's little tricks that you'll probably learn, like on a straight edge like this, I was saying pull it down and measure, but you know, you'll learn that you can hold that down to the edge. Take the edge of a pencil, just kind of rub that edge. That gives you your exact line. Just little, you know, if you're just going to cover one plane in your lifetime, take your time and enjoy it, you know. But you know, when we're in the shop, I'm trying to make good time of things, and everything just doesn't have to have a ruler on it, you know, when you can do a little trick like that. But see, that put it right to the edge. Just to cover this real quick on the pinking shears. Everyone knows this, but the way a pinking shear, let's just say your fabric, you've got weaves running this way, you've got weaves running this way. If I take a razor blade and I cut this, and I'm kind of coming in and out and in and out, these ends, the ends on a straight edge, see that, the way that's doing? And see, I'm just pulling more of those out, and it just makes a mess, and I'm pulling more of those out. When you pink the edge, you are essentially pinking the edge so that when this string comes out, it's going to stop there and it's going to stop there. This string's going to stop there and stop there. So the worst case scenario on a pinked edge where I was pulling these parts out is just the very tip of that would ever come out. Now, it's going to be a little fuzz from it, but, you know, unless you get to pulling it all the way down to the base of that, and then you start pulling it out. There's times that we'll cover when you're doing a wing, and you're double covering over the leading edge, and you got one fabric going to go over the other, and you really don't want to pink that whole edge because the other fabric's going to go over it, and you're going to be trying to, before you put the second fabric on, you're going to take that iron and just really smooth that down. Sometimes it's best to lay it against the aluminum part of the wing and take a razor and cut it and iron that little edge down, feel like a paint line or something. That way your fabric doesn't, you know, come over it. But there's times that you're really going to need to, like right here where I use that to cut, if you're going to use a razor, a lot of times you can take a little thin glue and go ahead and wet the fabric and then let that dry. And that little bit of thin glue dried in there, it kind of sets the fabric. Then you can take a razor and you can cut the fabric where you have wetted that down and it's dry, and it won't fray near as bad with that wetted, you know, where it has been wetted before and it's already dry. So a lot of times in a place where you're going to need to cut a straight edge with a razor, you can go ahead and wet that fabric with thin, let it dry, cut it, and it will still fray if you really mess with it, but it kind of holds and sets that fabric. All right, to get started here on the end, like I mentioned before, you don't really want to just take a rag with a reducer and wet down. Two ways you can do this. If we start wetting this down, and wetting it in, it's going to do that. Because there's a lot of tension right around the corner of that edge. Now you can hold it down and do it and do it and do it, and that's where sometimes you get to the point that you've got it too wet and it's just standing up, and you'll sit there and fan it and let the reducer kind of come out, and then it'll get to where it sticks down. But two ways you can kind of, on a sharp edge, you can take an iron sometimes and you can start that corner over by just, see how now I've started that corner over a little bit with that iron. You can do it that way, and then it would glue down okay. Or, when I was saying a while ago about re-wetting it, you come in here, and I found that you can come in here and just give this a back dressing across your, now you've just reactivated that two thick layers of glue. And sometimes when you go right at it, it may want to come back up, which means you got a little bit too wet. But I mean, it goes down real nice and works from the end out, and it's smooth, and there's no glue on your hand because it's really on that wet side. So you're going to want some thin glue to go ahead into that fabric. Now I'm making a mess there. I should have dried my glue a little more, but brush a little more. But now it's wetted through. Sometimes if you don't watch, you will get it a little too wet and it will try to come loose. But that's pretty well done there. It's been glued down. You wetted it, bedded it in it, rubbed it down, put another coat in. And we'll get into this after a while. It's not ready for fabric yet, because on the other side, because remember, this is only thin glue here. We've already got some thick on this side, but remember, we're going to need to come on this side, and you got to really start thinking, where all am I going to come back with my fabric? We're going to want to put a layer of thick glue right here when we're done, and that's going to be after it dries and everything. All right, these little areas right here can do the same thing. You can back wet it or just wet it through. I'll go ahead and do a wet through on this. Now, remember a while ago when I told you if you can get it right here, see how that white line looks right there? When I was wetting that down, now I got the fabric, some glue right there. The glue is not, you can see my finger, the glue is not going through that already glued side. You know, going to wet it down. Well, when I wet it down, there's actually going to be a little spot there that you're really going to have to rub and rub and rub and reactivate that glue till you start seeing through it to come down. And that's usually in those situations where you've got a little glue on that edge. That's why I go ahead and take that brush all the way up into that other spot, wet that side down again. You can let it set for just a little bit. And then it's dry. It ain't enough on it to come all the way through on your hand. And you will eventually get a little glue on your hand. At the end of the day, you know, take a little reducer and clean your hands up. If you don't, you'll be sitting all Sunday in church, sitting there picking at that and picking at that and picking at that. And it's amazing how much glue you'll sit there and mess with for the next 2 days. So when you get ready to leave the shop, just have some raw reducer before you put your brushes in it. Just kind of dip your hand in there and just swish it a little bit and take a rag, and you're clean and ready to go. Coming around the end here, I mentioned before, there's 2 ways this can be done. Seen it done several ways. If you didn't do the big pull trick, even if you did do the big pull trick, you're going to have to still cut that off. So one way is you can start right here at the tip. You see that this is kind of a straight run here, so we're going to say, well, there's not much of a factor happening yet. So I'm going to go ahead and just wet this, and I'm going to take this one around. Now I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back with some. I usually kind of do it right then. You can come back after it dries, but if you don't watch, it'll have that same effect a while ago where the fabric's got some glue in it and ain't wanting to come through. I usually come right back with my thin glue and just get me a good base on it and that little edge down. Now I'm going to show you, before we put that other side, we're going to take an iron and we're going to make sure them little tips and stuff is worked down. All right, so you can see right here, we're coming up on, because of the contour of this, it's something's got to shrink for this to work right. And see, I'm starting to gain a little problem here. Well, there's 2 ways we can look at that. Now I've done got it wet, but let's just say you start right about here and cut a slit. And you'll get to where you know about how much. Let's just say I cut another one right here. Now, in effect, it ain't going to be enough hardly to do, but when these both lay down, see how this is overlapping a little bit? That's what you're doing, is cutting a little bit of a relief so that you can keep on gluing around there. And you've got a relief for that to go. I like to lay the first one down and get it to where it kind of sticks, and then that next one will come down. There's a very, very, very slight overlap. And that's one way to do it. And you know, once you wet it, kind of make sure it sticks down. Now see, there's that cut that I made. It's just a little bitty knob sticking out there. And once it's dry, we'll take an iron and we'll take that down with an iron to where it just won't be anything felt on that part. All right, another way is, I was taught way back when, we got fabric fixing to have to take up down here to do something. So if you take an iron, you say, well, I'm going to shrink it. Well, if you don't watch and you get to messing with it here, next thing you know, you've bumped it to it, and you've made it stick here, and you've made it stick there, and you just, you know, it's hard to control just how much it shrank. And Jesse over at Special Products showed me this trick a long time ago. If you're in a tight spot, you can come in here and take a business card and just kind of, see, I kind of shrunk that a little. Use that business card to be as your backing. And I shrunk that. And you ain't going to get all the shrinkage in one spot. You're going to work it around and take up your slack. Come back over it a little bit. And until you get, I haven't done it this way in a long time. I usually just, if I'm in a hurry, I cut a few little slits and keep going. You got to be careful to not let it stick the thing down. But using that as a backing, you can go ahead and get that kind of shrunk. Now you've took up some of the slack. That could probably go a little more. And I'm going to see how it does. It probably could shrink just a little more around there, but you can tell it's kind of cupped around there. You go in and wet it, and this is the very peak here, so this was the tightest spot. Take my rag, hand, wrap it all the way around. And see, now it's pretty well smooth all the way around that. And same way, just working around, it won't be as bad on this long run. You know, I may put one or two little slits just because it will gain a little, because you'll get times that you'll just get down to a little loose spot that you just have to turn that iron up, and you just, you know, just have to work out a little spot that's wrinkled up. But most time you can take an iron and mess with it and get it laid down. All right, at this point I'll go ahead and get this part glued down with the camera off, and before I start gluing the other side, what we'll do is see how I reached around there? Well, that didn't, you can put a little more glue under that if you want, but that very end, another thing is that iron, start here and take it around. See, that beds right into that glue, and that iron will activate down, and you can put a little thin on that. That's where there's no glue. This is, you can hear it, it's dry fabric. That's where I want to take the thin. And that before I start putting the thick, I want to take thin. You see it change color. That just went all the way through. When I get all of it laid down, and I get these ends all the way down below the surface, you know, you may even want to come back in here with a razor and maybe trim this back. I was just kind of cutting this by eye. Get all this laid down, then you're going to put thin on it, and then we're going to put thick, and then we're going to think about the fabric going on again. We're going to put thick from here all the way around, but this time we got to be careful coming around here. If we want our fabric, say, to come to here, you know, a lot of guys will come all the way up here and try to cut a straight line, and that's fine, but you're going to have a piece of reinforcement tape go there. If you come back around all the way to here, sometimes you can get you a straight edge and a pencil and put you a line, put your glue in a good line and everything, and then we put that other piece of fabric on, come around there and measure it to the line. That will be the one that you want to take a little more time to measure and get a good straight edge, because your tape's going to go over that, and there's going to be a fine little indentation under your tape. But as long as it's straight and looks neat, it's fine. So at this point, I'll go ahead and seal this side down, and I'll have everything glued up with the thick, ready to put the fabric on the other side. All right, welcome back. Got this kind of ironed or glued down and pulled in pretty well all the way around. Not trying to be just total neat, because I'm trying to keep these videos to a minimum. I mean, we've already found out we'll be doing something, we'll get done, and Kelly will say, well, that was 11 minutes, or that was 19. You know, I don't want to get into something too long, so we're trying to stop it a lot. And it's not on it's not even on an airplane what we're doing here. And like I mentioned a while ago, your other fabric is going to come around here, so we had to make sure we had thin glue, a couple coats of thick, because our fabric's going to come back around to here. And you can see where it just did it by hand, just kind of put a little line, but you'll lay you a straight edge and do you perfect. You don't have to get real crazy, because if you remember, we're fixing to put a mark on out here, and we're going to have a reinforcement go over this and out to these. So, but that's just going to give you a good guideline when you lay it over. And when we put this top one over, we might even lay it all the way over and look through the other piece of fabric when you lay it over here, and you can see that line through there, and then you can lay another straight edge and then do you a perfect mark, and then cut it with your pinking shears. Just remember here, a while ago, what we did, we've got this gap. Remember, we cut in and we sacrificed one corner to be able to go. So when we come in with the other side, we're going to cut into the other and sacrifice some to cover this part. And that's one thing you want to kind of always do on the ends when you're done. Take your time and take your iron and try to dress up all your ends and stuff and get them real good and clean and tight, because when you prime it and you're so excited about stuff being shiny out here, and then you know, later on, all you do, every time you wash the planer look, you'll see an open area or some little something. So all the little areas, you want to take your time and take your iron and go around and just really kind of close those up. Did the same thing up here. Come around where it's about where we're going to glue it to. It's going to get a reinforcement that's going to overlap and come around this. I'll probably get my cousin to do one video on explaining the bias tape, you know, using that versus a regular tape. But one thing I wanted to mention, we're trying to rush through this and it's still kind of wet. You get ready to stretch. You want it to dry several hours before you start trying to stretch anything. But when I put these marks on here, we're coming up and gluing on this loose. It probably would be a good idea if you took the iron, and we'll go over ironing this, but you'll already see it done. Taking the iron and just doing a real light shrinkage just to get all of this kind of tight around the edge so that when you're gluing, you're not gluing to a loose edge or anything. Just kind of putting a little bit of tightness in it would probably help you. That being said, we've put the glue on, we've got the thick on, so we're basically going to do just like what we did a while ago with a piece of fabric, and we'll just kind of center it up. And like I said, we're not going to show any partiality, so this side I found a piece of sinconite. So this piece is going to have Airtech or Superflat on one side and sinconite on the other. All right, that's pretty well got it covered. I got plenty. This piece was big enough. Kind of work everything out to the sides. Get rid of most of your issues. And with that, we'll do just like we did on the other. We'll start wetting it through with thin. Getting it down where it's solid all the way across, not a lot of hollow places. And we'll go all the way around this. So I will, when the camera stops, I'll have all of this side down. I'll go ahead and be just like we did on the other. Now you can cut this, like I mentioned, flip it over and lay the piece all the way around, and you can see through the other side, that pencil line. Like if this piece was coming up on the other side, you can see that pencil line. Then you go ahead and lay your straight edge and mark your edge on it, and that'd be something to just cut a perfect line down. Same way, you know, reaching it around, you can turn it around and use that pencil line this time to put your mark on the other side. But when we come back this next time, I'll have it all glued down and have time to dry. So this will probably be the end of this video series right here, and the next one I'll just do a short one on shrinking, and it'll be a very short one, and we'll shrink everything and be ready to start getting ready to stitch.